Good afternoon, everybody. Oh dear me. Are we all still moaning about England losing yesterday? Don't say it, Rory. Is he gone? He's upstairs. There's a shame. Oh. Is that me? It is me. There we go. Is that all right? What are you saying to me, Lord? Is that better? Put it in my back pocket. That works. There we go. Let's run with that. We've just come off the back of 5 weeks in Timothy that Lauren has done for us. If you missed any of those, go to the YouTube channel and look up Oak Tree Acton. You will see that series there. Go and watch them if you missed any of them. In the next few weeks, and then running up to Easter, we are looking at a series of face-to-face with Jesus. The idea that we can look at the stories in the accounts in the Gospels and see people and situations where Jesus came face-to-face with people. Some of them were really good, positive reactions, and people went away transformed. Other situations, people went away massively offended and insulted on a massive level. We're going to look at everything in between and either end of that. So we're going to have offense and we're going to have transformation. And over the weeks, we're going to look at different situations and different accounts. I just love this. When I was just hearing that read out again, hasn't Ed got a great voice for reading? I could fall asleep listening to that. That was really quite soothing. But when he was reading that, I had lots of memories of, we're of an age now in our family where our youngest, Jazz, is 13. Yes, 13. And Jake's 20. So we're kind of, there will be times where we'll reminisce about when they were little and the silly stories keep coming out. Our Dan's first word, not mum, not dad, cowpole. Social services. He had teeth coming through at the time, and he went, "Oh, Paul." So it was really sweet. And all these kind of stories keep coming out. When our Jazz went to her little play group, you used to get a toy to take with you every day. You handed it into the box at the start of the day, and at the end of the day, they took them out and they handed them back, and you got to tell a little story about the toy. And our Jazz, it was like a kind of very young age, loved Top Gear and cars. And so there was a lad in the little group, and he handed, it's a Porsche 911, and he handed it back and just went, not as good as a Lamborghini Murcielago. So all these stories keep coming out. So this is an account of Jesus when he was little. Okay, and I'm going to start by sharing a story. It's not my own story. It's an account of a friend of mine who was a curate in Guildford. And he was in a church, very similar kind of band set up there. And they were all the band members were kind of hipster types. They had the beards and the tighty jeans, tattoos. Pretty much like Paul, really. And they all had the tattoos and the trendy outfits, apart from the bass player. Now, the bass player was in his late 60s and never used to stand up, never used a bit of music. And he used to, like you, Andy. No, you're not in your 60s, no. No. Back away. But a few years yet. And he used to just sit on this chair and play. And the hipster kind of musicians used to tolerate this because he was such a good bass player. He knew all the licks, the moves, and everything. And he used to sit there playing away. And mate of mine, Phil, was talking to him one afternoon while he was kind of setting up. And it turns out in the 60s and 70s, he was a professional musician. Not only was he a professional musician, he had his high point and low point at exactly the same time. And Phil went to him, "What was your high point and low point?" And he went, "Well, we were at this festival, and we were jamming away on this side stage. And I became very aware that nobody was looking at me. Everybody was looking at the guy off to the side. Jimi Hendrix." Okay. Now, if you don't know who Jimi Hendrix is, basically, he's like the kind of royalty of guitar players. And not only was he stood off to the sideline, he went onto the stage to kind of uproarious applause, puts on his guitar, and the room went silent. And they started playing together, this bass player and Jimi Hendrix. And thought, look, that's a high point. That's amazing. He went, yeah, but I then at that point had a just as equal low point. As I was playing, as I was transfixed by this rock royalty, playing away, he leans across to me and went, wrong key. At the point where he met this guy, this hero, he was so transfixed, he was playing in totally and utterly the wrong key. So what are we going to do when we come face to face with our heroes? To be honest, if I come face to face with the England rugby team at this point in time, I don't think much is going to happen. I'll probably just call them to prayer. After yesterday's exhibition, they probably need it. But who is the equivalent of Jimi Hendrix for you? And if you came in contact with them, how would you react? How would you be moved? How would you be changed? And this is the reason why we're looking at Jesus in this run-up to Easter. This challenge, this idea that when we come face to face with him, something has got to happen. And we have this wonderful account in Luke's Gospel. Grab a Bible. They're all on the tables. If you're not near one, just find one, stand up, grab one, doesn't matter. Share one with somebody next to you. And we've got these new Bibles, so we're going to jump through them at various different points and find out what's behind this story of Simeon and Anna. The first thing that you've got to kind of realize in this story is that it's a theme that is massively important to Luke. Luke, the author of this gospel, one of his major themes is putting men and women together. You might think, well, that's kind of not massive, is it? But when you put it in the context of who Luke was writing to and the message he wanted to push the idea that, look, this story, this gospel, this transforming message is not just for men. It's for women as well. So you get the story of Simeon and Anna put together, and he puts these pairs all the way through the gospel. If you've got a bit of time later tonight, have a look at it for yourself. In the story at the beginning of the gospel, if you just flick back a page, the story of John the Baptist, we have the story of a priest named Zachariah being visited by Gabriel. But wait a minute, who else gets visited by Gabriel? Mary. So you get Zachariah and you get Mary. You get Simeon, you get Anna. All the way through this gospel, this emphasis that there's men and women. The use of pairs throughout this gospel, this massive countercultural point he was trying to make is that this is accessible for everyone. Men and women together are important. This was totally countercultural to the context of the day where the men were the most important in Jewish society. The men were the most important, not the women, the men. This was one of Luke's major themes all the way through the gospel. And then we have in this story, we have the story of Simeon and Anna talking about God's redemptive plan fulfilled through Jesus. Second thing we want to do is actually turning to page 1028. The second thing I want to see about Luke's gospel is the story is grounded within the context of the law. That's like the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament are the books to the left. First 5 books are known as the law. So let's just have a look at the passage that it says. We found that so we find out that actually when they first came to do the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took them to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord. Now, if you look, there's a little B and a footnote. And if you look down towards the bottom, it tells you where that reference comes from. It comes from Exodus 13. Now, if you keep your finger in Luke and flick all the way to the second book of the Bible, on page 70, you will find that directive. This is talking to the children of God, the Israelites, chosen special to be with him, and we're talking about the consecration of the firstborn. This is where it comes from. Exodus 13, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belong to me, whether human or animal. But why is that? We find the answer later on in verse 12. You are to give over to the Lord the firstborn of every womb, all the firstborn redeemed life. Oh, it's later on, sorry. Verse 14. In the days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So why the firstborn? Why are they special? Why are they consecrated to the Lord? Why? Because look what I did for you. Look what I did for you. When you were in slavery, I took you out of that. I took you out of bondage so you could be with me and worship in a land that I have chosen for you. So these purification rites were set out for every child, every firstborn child of every couple. And the second point, if we go to verse 24, back in Luke 2 on page 1028. Verse 24, and then once we do, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what it said of the law, a pair of doves or 2 pigeons. Now that might sound a little bit odd and a bit weird, but hey, you know, it's a couple of thousand years ago, let them get on with it. Or is there something more going on? Let's look at the next footnote. You can see a little C at the end of that. Look at the bottom. It says Leviticus 12, verse 8. Most of you have been to church for the last year I've been here will know that Leviticus is one of my favorite books of the Bible. Page 113. Leviticus 12. Starting to read halfway through verse 7. These are the regulations for the woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. If she cannot afford a lamb, she is to bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, one a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean. So suddenly, we get another slight insight into what is important to Luke, a theme that goes all the way through Luke's gospel, where the first one is accessible for women as well as men. This is good news. The second thing that we might have overlooked if we hadn't looked at the footnote, keep your thumb in Leviticus, flick back to Luke. Can anyone put 2 and 2 together? And to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what it said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or 2 young pigeons. Anybody put 2 and 2 together yet? She can't afford a lamb. A second major theme of Luke is that this story is for just as much for the poor as it is for the rich. We follow the footnote, it shows us that. All the way through Luke's gospel, we have this massive push that the poor are important to God. This was massively countercultural. And we say this is massively countercultural for then. I reckon it's massively countercultural for us today. That the poor are important to God. This is why we do things like CAP. This is why we work alongside people like Food Bank and Hope for Justice, because the poor and the oppressed are important to God. Because he was one. His mum couldn't afford it, so he ended up having the sacrifice was a dove or just a pigeon. Not just a pigeon, a couple of pigeons, and they had to be nice pigeons. But it was open and accessible to the poor. Let's flip back to the Luke story in Luke chapter 2. Let's not lose the reaction and engagement with Jesus of Simeon and Anna. Simeon, convinced that he would not die before seeing the Lord's Messiah. Verse 27, moved by the Spirit, he went to the temple courts. We don't know how long he waited. We don't know when he got the message that he was going to see the Messiah. But when he got given the message of go to the temple, what did he do? He went. He went. He was told that he was going to see it. He was told to go, and he acted on it. We're part of the hub that I'm in this term is the Soul Shaper Hub. And the idea behind it is to kind of look into church history and look into different practices within Christianity and try and do something slightly different over the week and then come back the following week and go, well, this is how it went with me. We've done things like the Jesus prayer, the idea that you don't just have I'm going to do my prayer time in the morning, not that that's bad, but I'm going to spend my 10 minutes in prayer and reading the Bible at the start of the day, then I'm going to get on with my day and forget about God. The idea is that Jesus prayer, throughout the day, you revisit it, and you revisit engaging with God. This week, we are doing fasting. Woohoo! On the day you're giving out fair trade chocolate. But we're fasting. I'm gutted. We've got such nice chocolate. And the deal is that at Sunday, kind of at sundown, from Mondays to Monday sundown, we're not eating. Come on, sympathy. No, you're not supposed to do that with fasting, are you? But we're trying these different disciplines, these different ideas about how we can engage with God, how we can listen to God, how we can act on his nudging. And actually, I think fasting, for me, probably going to be the most important one, because you stop eating, and so you end up with a rumbly tummy. And actually, when it rumbles, the idea is you think of God. What is God saying to me now? What am I going to act upon now? What am I going to do that is different to my normal practice? This is the idea of fasting, and I'd like to think that this is the challenge of Simeon's testimony, is he didn't just hear what God was saying to him, he acted on it as well. As a vicar, you can get into lots of different conversations, some of them brilliant, some of them are massively frustrating. One of the most frustrating conversations I've had in the 12 years of being ordained is the conversation of, I'm waiting for God to tell me what to do. Okay, God tells you to do lots of things in the Bible. Pick one, go for it. I lose my patience a little bit. Maybe I should pray more for patience in that situation. But actually, there's loads of stuff we can hear from God. The idea is to act on it. Not just hear, but act. Hear and act is a massive, massive challenge from Simeon's testimony. Must have been looking all the time as people came in through the temple. He knew he was going to meet this Messiah. Did he know it was going to be a baby? Did he think it was going to be a man? Did he think it was going to be a young person? Did he think it was going to be a woman? He must have been looking all the time for the Messiah. I heard a great story about a Jesuit monastery years ago in the center of France. And it was one of those ones that always kind of survived on previous years. And years before, it was bustling, it was wonderful. All the monks working there pointed towards God, and people were drawn from miles around to visit this monastery. But it had fallen on bad times, and slowly but surely, the numbers of monks shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until there was just 6 of them left. And the abbot of this monastery went to see a fellow abbot in another monastery and said, look, I'm struggling. The reality is we are going to close if it carries on the way we're doing. Have you got anything you can help us do? Have you got anything you can help us? And this abbot says, well, it's funny you should say that. I've been praying about you, and I've got a message from God for you. And the message is that out of the last 6 of you, one of you is a major prophet who's going to bring massive change to this area of France. I don't know who it is, but it's one of you. And he went back to this monastery, really excited, really kind of eager to know what was going on. And he shared it with his 5 fellow monks and said, look, one of us here is a massive prophet. He's going to bring massive change to this area of France. But I don't know who it is. As time went on, the monks changed how they engaged with each other. They served each other like they've never served before. They went out of their way to speak of God, to pray to God, to share his gospel in that area because they knew one of them was called by God to be a prophet to transform this area. Slowly but surely, this monastery grew because of that vision and that passion and that creativity of speaking prophetically into a shrinking community. And slowly but surely it was transformed. Are we looking for that Messiah? Are we looking for that in people's faces? The people we work with, the people we share the tube journey with into London, the bus journey. Are we looking in people's eyes thinking, it might just be? That was Simeon's attitude in the temple. Secondly, we have Anna. We have a total contrast. We don't really know much about her. We know who she's what tribe she's from and who her dad's name was, but we don't really get masses of in the same way that we do with Simeon. But we get a woman who by their standards would have been cursed, because it would have been seen as being cursed, or at the very least done something very wrong. She's been living with her husband for, is it 4 years, it says here? 7 years after her marriage, and then as a widower until she was 84. She's obviously done something wrong to deserve that. Would have been the predominant attitude to her. She wouldn't have been taken seriously, but what do we know? Verse 37. She never left the temple, but worshipped day and night, fasting and praying. She heard what was going on, and in verse 38, coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. She didn't just hold on to this information. She didn't just sit there and go, oh, look, little baby Jesus, and then just walked off. She gave thanks to God and told everyone about it. How are we acting on what we know about Jesus? Are we holding it close? Are we like the character in the parable of the talents who's got this precious commodity and go and bury it in a field and don't share it with anybody? Or are we like Anna, who just can't wait to tell everybody? Are we acting on what we know? Or are we holding on to what we know? Simeon, looking for the Messiah in every person he met. Anna, acting upon what she saw and telling everyone about it. Two people whose lives were directed by God, but transformed by seeing a baby in the temple. Transformed. One of them, knowing the message he had, he wasn't going to die until he saw the Messiah. He's seen the Messiah. Well, he's going to die. What a wonderful testimony. Anna, who lived many years after the loss of her husband, probably pretty much spurned by society, pretty much living in the temple for the time, worshipping and praying and fasting. That's what the temple was there for if you were a widow. But people kind of, look. But she saw Jesus, saw his effect, and told people about it. So what are we going to do? How are we going to engage with the story of Jesus? I'm just going to wander over here. It might do a bit of feedback. Excuse me if it does. Oh, it did. Quite tuneful feedback. And what I want to encourage you to do because we're in a period of Lent in the run-up to Easter, if you've not got a Bible, take one. I've got some at the front here. Please help yourself. if it's the idea that you want to kind of dig more into the Bible to find out about this person on a page in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, take a Bible and go and read about it. Don't take my word for it. Read the Bible. Good place to start is Luke's Gospel. You'll find in the front there will be a contents page. You'll find Luke's. Read it. Find out how people's lives were transformed by Jesus when he met them. If you don't want to take something so big, we have some Mark's Gospels here. Read into those. Mark's Gospel is a shorter version of Jesus' story, pretty much like an action movie. There's no kind of depth to it at all. First line is something along the lines of, Jesus, the Son of God. It's kind of there. There you go. There's no kind of hidden agenda thing there. There's no kind of metaphors working. It's Jesus, Son of God. There you go, first line. If you want to take one, please take one. If you've got questions around it, we've got a Why Jesus booklet as well. Take one of those. Don't leave here with questions about who and what Jesus is. Take this opportunity. Come to these services. Read more. Pray more. And if you sat there thinking, well, yeah, I know this, then do what Simeon and Anna did and act on it. Let's bow our heads.